Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Really appreciate everyone showing up. It's a really exciting time to be in Brattleboro right now, whether you are an employer or a community member, part of the schools. A lot is changing and it's changing quickly. And I think, again, it's a really exciting time for all of us. Today, we'll be talking about how we can support our newest community members. And we can expect to see 100 Afghans who are being resettled through the Ethiopian Community Development Council, which is a national refugee resettlement organization here in Brattleboro between January 1st and March 1st. And it, as some of you may know, the resettlement process of our Afghan allies has been quick and complicated, but they're here. Right now at World Learning, there are around 35 people who have already arrived, and they are excited to be here. And most importantly, many of them are excited to work. So as in the email you received, between 40 and 60 of these individuals are working age and are eager to start earning an income to support their families both here and back home or wherever their families may be in the world. I will start out by reminding folks that this is a humanitarian effort first, and that these folks have been through quite a lot. And yet, that said, what we've heard is that these folks are really eager to get to work and are really excited to be as part of our community as quickly as possible. So the agenda today is going to be pretty straightforward. First, we're going to talk about the legal implications of employing Afghan humanitarian parolees, which is specific language. They are refugees in a lot of ways, and they're also similar to asylum seekers in many ways, and we'll talk a bit about that. But what are your legal responsibilities as an employer? We're going to talk about what is happening at World Learning and SIT, what support these folks are getting around employment before you can expect to see them in the workplace or applying to your jobs. And lastly, some other exciting opportunities around workplace improvement or tools that you may be able to use for to create a more supportive and inclusive workforce. So, and what I'll say is all of this work is part of the BDCC Welcoming Communities Initiative. And that is really focused on making sure our communities are welcoming to all different kinds of immigration so that we can really support a 21st century workforce. I think as employers, when we look at our counterparts in other parts of the country, or even just New England, immigration plays a really big role in the makeup of the workforce in most other communities other than Southern Vermont. And so that is something that this initiative is trying to change as part of community vibrancy and long-term economic development. So without further ado, I want to start with the big picture about the legal components of employing refugees and asylees. And I would like to thank and introduce David Harlow from DRM and Megan Klutt and Cassandra Gonzalez from CBK law offices. So I think David's going to go first, and then we'll hear from some others. And this is the thing I probably know least about, and I encourage folks to raise your hands or just shout out, ask questions as you go along, because this expertise is really important and not as abundantly available as my own expertise might be. So thanks to David and the team from CBK.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Welcome, everybody, and good morning. I want to give a quick note about the division of labor here this morning. So as many of you know, and I see some familiar names on the list here, I'm an employment lawyer, and I help companies and other employers in Vermont and other places in the country too navigate employment laws and labor laws that relate to its workforce. I am not an immigration lawyer. And for that reason, I took the liberty of inviting Megan and Cassandra to speak with you this morning because there's really two areas of the law that are most in play in employing this group. There's general employment law concerns, and then there's some immigration issues, which I'm not qualified to address with you, but Megan and Cassandra are experts, and they very graciously agreed to speak with us today. I'd like to talk with you a little bit about one aspect of employing Afghan refugees or any sort of diverse population in Vermont. As many of you know, in Vermont, we are, I think, the whitest or the second whitest state in the country. It's just a fact that we don't have a particularly diverse racially or even culturally workforce. We're diverse in a lot of ways, but we're not necessarily diverse in those particular ways. And with influx of new and diverse people to the area and new and diverse people in the workplace, I felt it was important to provide you with some reminders and best practices for engaging in this. And a lot of this, I think, will be reviewed, particularly for any companies on the line with HR departments. This is basic blocking and tackling of workplace law. But on the other hand, not every employer in Vermont has that experience and that capability. We've got a lot of small employers in the state, a lot of them without human resources departments. A lot of times the owner, founder, and CEO of the company is also the HR person, one of the workers, and about 5 other things. So I'm gonna quickly here share my screen with you and give you a quick overview of some things that I think are the most important. And I'm having a little trouble sharing my screen. I don't know. How long has this pandemic been going on? I should be able to do this by now. Let me see.
Still a snafu like every week.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, can you share my screen for me?
Let me see if it lets me do that.
He might not have permission. He might have to give you permission.
No, I think.
Yeah, the host disabled the participant screen sharing. So you have to go, whoever the host is, go to the security button and the arrow next to it and click to check mark allow participants to screen.
I've made David the host. Do you want to give it another try?
Oh, sorry.
No
I'm like,
worries.
Hold on. I'm about to have a breakthrough.
There you are.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. All right. I've only got 15 minutes here, so I'm going to try to make this snappy. Here, look at this handsome guy. I work in Brattleboro. Number one thing to think about when you've got a diverse population in your workforce are federal and state anti-discrimination laws. There's, I think a very positive trend that's happening throughout the country where companies and other employers are focused on diversity and inclusion. And that's a fantastic thing. It makes us feel good about ourselves in a lot of ways. We're doing the right thing, but also it's got an additional benefit as I see the world. And that's cutting down on legal liability from discrimination lawsuits. When you've got a more inclusive workplace, you're less likely to have conflict and different types of disputes between management and labor that can lead to very expensive, very time-consuming, and oftentimes completely unnecessary lawsuits. And so that's you know, the legal backdrop to diversity and inclusion in the workplace is very serious. And as an employer, you need to understand that there are certain things that just can't be done in the workforce. And there's certain things you got to do to make sure that those things don't happen. You'll see on the lower right-hand quadrant of the slide, there's a list of some of the protected classifications that flow to employees in the workplace. You can't discriminate against people based on this, notably national origin being one of them. So there's no shortage of legal regulation in this area. We've got all sorts of different statutes, federal and state, Equal Pay Act requiring equal pay for equal work among genders, Title VII, which covers religion, sexual orientation now, gender identity, national origin, religion, and prohibits harassment and discrimination based on those characteristics at work on a federal level. There's also protections for older workers over 40 on a federal level. And as a sidebar, in Vermont, there's just an age discrimination prohibited requirement across the board. There's no over 40 requirement. So technically you could have an age discrimination claim filed by a young person. So that's an added complication. Americans with Disabilities Act, if you're involved in the HR world at all, that's something that it should be near and dear to you. But that's not it. You know, there's other new legislation that's happened more recently, and we're continuing to see new bills being considered and discussed in the legislature federally. Now, in Vermont, we've also got the Vermont Fair Employment Practices Act, and this dovetails pretty closely with federal law. But one key difference is that a lot of the federal statutes apply to, you know, larger employers. There's often a minimum number of employees, and it's not that big. It's, you know, often 15 to 20, depending on the statute. But in Vermont, the Fair Employment Practices Act applies to employers with just one or more employees. So even your small mom and pop, you know, snowplow lawn care service is going to be covered under the Vermont Fair Employment Practices Act, which means it applies to a lot more employers than the federal statutes. So what happens if you're not careful about these things? I asked someone in my office to find a really good example of a case where an employer did something really stupid, didn't pay attention to these types of issues in the workplace, and find out what happened. And we uncovered this case out in California, Diaz v. Tesla. Now, in this case, these facts are a little bit egregious, but they serve a point. Owen Diaz was a elevator operator in a Tesla factory, and he was subjected to some really nasty stuff. He was told, go back to Africa. The N-word was bandied about. He saw racist cartoons and derogatory caricatures of African children. And, you know, this is really bad stuff. Okay. And this shouldn't be happening in the workplace, particularly not in 2022. Okay. Or 2021, or even in the late 2010s when this happened, according to case facts. And, you know, he brought a lawsuit and he challenged his employer. He quit. He didn't get fired. He quit, but he alleged that this conduct was just so bad he had no choice to quit. All right. So what happened? $137 million later against Tesla, with you know, close to $7 million in compensatories and $130 million in punitive damages. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, if you don't do exactly what I say in this presentation, or you make an innocent mistake, you're going to get hit with a $130 million judgment. But what I am saying is that, particularly for small employers, particularly for employers who aren't used to dealing with a diverse population, what may seem like at the time an innocent joke or a misunderstanding can lead to litigation that can be extremely costly, and in some cases it might end your company if it's a small enough company and if it's a big enough claim. All right, so what are some things you can do to mitigate against that risk? First of all, you got to stay on top of the law. And I can help with that to some degree. It's good that everyone's here and attending this presentation because that's one way to do it. But things are constantly changing, like I said, and it's important to keep your eye on the ball. In the Vermont legislature, in this session, there are at least 2 bills that would, if passed, would change the Vermont Fair Employment Practices Act and make it much more onerous for employers to defend against claims. In one bill, it changes the standard for what's a hostile work environment from the current standard, which is harassment, which is, quote, severe and pervasive, to a lesser standard, which would make it very easy for anyone with hurt feelings based on something that was said at work about any of these protected characteristics from bringing a lawsuit and suing their employer. And so it's vitally important that employers stay in tune with what's happening in the legislature and follow these things closely because the law changes very rapidly. Now, when in doubt, of course, you're going to want to talk to counsel about these things. You should also be talking to your insurance broker if you don't have an arrangement like this already, because like I said, discrimination suits can be very costly, and having EPLI insurance, which is employment practices liability insurance, can help protect your company if there is some sort of dispute. It's critical as an employer, and like I said, in Vermont, even those small employers with more than 1 employee, to have some written literature that describes the company's policy on equal employment opportunities and anti-discrimination. You want to make sure that after you've drafted this policy, it doesn't sit on a shelf. You want to communicate it to all your employees so they understand it and they understand what to do if they do have a problem. You've got a defense if you've got a well-communicated opportunity for employees to complain about harassment, and if they don't follow that opportunity that you've given them in a policy, then they just file a lawsuit, you've got a defense. You can say, hey, look, we had this procedure in place and they just ignored it and went off and filed a lawsuit. So it's really important, both legally and just to give employees an understanding of what they need to do to communicate these policies. And of course, I can help preparing these policies. You want to make sure that your hiring practices really comport with your ideals. You want to make sure that your hiring practices don't include either implicit or explicit barriers to entry for diverse candidates. And there's a variety of ways to do that, but in Vermont, it's obviously hard. It's hard for us at our firm because when we make hires, we encourage diverse applicants, and we want to include diverse people within our ranks. But there's currently there's kind of a shortage of diverse applicants. I think by taking part in this initiative, by showing interest in hiring candidates from different backgrounds and different races, ethnicities, etc., that's a very positive thing, and it should be codified in your written hiring procedures. And then, all these things are great, but unless you train your managers on them, they really don't mean much. You have to train managers on all your policies and procedures. So if and when a manager overhears, one of the jokes or slurs that were uttered in that Tesla case, the manager can say, hold on, time out, that's not allowed, and put a stop to it right away. But unless you've got your managers thinking that way, they might just be thinking, oh, look, it's just a joke. Or, what often happens, oh, look, it's just a joke, and the employee himself doesn't mind, he's laughing, right? That's not a defense. It's not a defense to say, everybody kind of gets along here, we joke around. If these types of things are happening, they need to be stopped. And then, these are posters that inform employees of their rights. These are required by the Vermont DOL and the federal agencies that enforce discrimination laws. And if you don't have those up, you want to make sure you can put them up. There's a lot of different things that you can do to help limit these types of lawsuits. And I don't mean to be too unfeeling or not warm and fuzzy enough about this. I don't mean to put it all in terms of legal exposure, but I want you to understand that if you do have a diverse workplace, you are necessarily going to have some new challenges that you may not be as familiar with. And I would encourage you to seek out guidance and do what you can to make sure that you've got a diverse, welcoming, and inclusive workplace that incorporates all these legal risk mitigation issues. So that's it for me. I've tapped out. I'm going to end my slideshow here if I can. Watch this. I won't be able to do it.
Any questions for David? Thank you so much. I think this was great.
Yeah.
Hi, David. This is Krista. I do have a quick question.
Hey, Krista. Yeah.
Hi. I'm hearing that, there might be some delays in Afghanistan receiving Social Security cards. How do we go about hiring someone who might be waiting a Social Security card?
Respectfully, I think that might be a nice segue to our next set of presenters. I'm trying to.
Let me see.
I promise you, I'm looking. I usually get that little bar that says "End slideshow." Here we go.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Alex, for bailing me out.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So I agree. I think that question is a great transition to our other legal counsel here, Megan and Cassandra. I don't know where you'd like to start, but please, dive right in.
Sure. Hi, everybody, and thanks for having us. I don't have a slide prepared, a little bit last minute, but I'll just talk a little bit about who we are. We are an immigration law firm. We are actually down in Western Massachusetts, but we work with people all over New England, and we do all kinds of applications. So we do humanitarian applications. We work with humanitarian parole and asylum, and we've been working a lot with the Afghan community, and we're doing a lot of pro bono work around asylum there in our community. But we also, primarily, we work with employers. We help file visa petitions. We work with students. So if in the future people have questions or are looking to actually sponsor somebody, we're happy to help. Another thing we can offer sometimes is I-9 training and I-9 auditing. So this is very helpful, everything that David talked about. And you do need to stay in compliance. And the most important way to do that is through your I-9s. So I wanted to just talk about that a little bit because I think everyone is familiar with the I-9 process, but as it sounds like many of you have not, if you haven't had experience hiring foreign nationals, you may not have focused that much on the kind of documents you're collecting for the I-9 process. So if everyone's a US citizen, you look at somebody's passport, you write that down on the I-9, that's pretty simple. But once you start having a more diverse workforce, you're going to start seeing a lot of different kinds of employment documents. And then you'll have to be a little more careful, making sure everything is up to date and accurate. And if you're thinking of hiring, or really anytime, it might be a good idea to look through the I-9s you have to make sure you are in compliance, that they're all filled out correctly, and that your staff is trained on how to fill them out. For the I-9, in order to work for you, they're going to have to present a List A document you'll see online, or a List B and C document. A List A document is a document that shows both your identity and your authorization to work. great example is a US passport. But a List B document is an identification of some sort with a photo, and a List C document is authorization for employment. So what you'll start to see if you're hiring foreign nationals is sometimes you'll see a document that has an expiration date, and you don't have to worry about that with US citizens, but with foreign nationals often you do. It's not a big deal. It just means that you're going to have a system for going back and checking, okay, if there's an expiration date in 2 years or 1 year, I have to go back and re-verify that person. That means when the expiration date is approaching, you have to go back, make sure that they have a new document, a new expiration date, and make sure you keep your I-9 updated. So that's the biggest change you're going to see if you're diversifying your workforce in this way. Just I-9 tips in general, you want to keep them in your personnel file, keep them accessible, readily retrievable. It's okay to keep them electronically, but the big things to remember is that you have to be able to access them quickly, and you have to treat everyone the same. So if you don't have to keep copies of documents that people give you, but if you do it for somebody, you have to do it for everybody. And that's a general rule of thumb. Anything you're doing with one person for an I-9, you should make sure you do it for everyone with your I-9s. Keep them in the same place, treat them the same way. One question we get a lot for people who hire foreign nationals is, you want to make sure that if they have a temporary card that's going to expire, what do you do if you don't want to hire somebody for a short period of time? You want a permanent employee. How do you know? Can you refuse to hire somebody because they have a certain kind of document? Can you refuse to hire somebody because someone doesn't have a passport? No. So you cannot choose which kind of document the employee presents to you. You have to accept any of them. One thing you can do is you can ask somebody in the hiring process, will you require sponsorship from me now or in the future? That is a valid question to ask. And if somebody says, well, yes, I have work authorization for 6 months, and after that, I'm hoping you will sponsor me, you do not have to hire them at that point. So even though they've presented a valid document, you don't have to hire them if they have already told you it would be temporary. So those are just basics around I-9s. The documents you're going to see most, if you have questions about other foreign nationals, feel free to get in touch with us if you like. But for the Afghans, what you're going to see is certain kinds of classes. People who have come in, a lot of them are coming in as green card holders. That means they actually have a green card. It's a small card. It is green, and it says lawful permanent resident. And you can put that in their I-9. If it has a 10-year expiration date or no expiration date, you actually don't have to re-verify them. It's basically like being a citizen in that sense. Some of them you will see have a 2-year expiration date. They are conditional permanent resident. If you see that, you do have to re-verify after 2 years, but usually that gets made into a permanent green card as a matter of course. So if you're seeing a conditional resident card or a permanent resident card, those are both perfectly acceptable employment documents, and you can use them. Somebody mentioned delays in social security cards. The folks who are coming in with green cards, they usually are able to get a social security number right away. But if there's a slight delay, that's okay. You can hire somebody without the social security number, at least for a few days, as long as it's coming in, because it's not required for employment, but it is going to be required for you to pay taxes and all that stuff. The other thing you might see is some of them are coming in as paroled. So they may have a document called an I-94, which says they were lawfully paroled into the country. However, without an employment authorization card, they are not eligible to work. So anybody who is coming from Afghanistan who is eligible to work is going to have either that green card, lawful permanent resident, conditional resident, or they're going to have another kind of card. It's about the same size. It's an employment authorization document. There's a few different categories for that. If they've come in with parole, they can request it. So it's not really up to you to figure out like, what is parole? Did they get parole? It's up to them to request this card. And once they get this card, they can ask for their social, and then they should be able to present you with the card and either their social right away or soon after that. Many of these folks are going to apply for political asylum. And when they do that, that's another opportunity to request a work card. So again, you don't have to worry about, oh, are they a parolee? Are they an asylum applicant? It doesn't matter. It's still going to be that same employment authorization document. It's just going to have a different little code number on it. So if they were paroled into the country, they'll get one kind of code. If they're applying for asylum, they'll get a different kind of code. And then there's yet another code when they finally get asylum. Now, technically, if someone has asylum, they don't need a card, but you are allowed to apply for one, and it certainly makes it easier. So again, even for people who actually have been granted asylum, you will see that employment authorization card. So far, most of the people from Afghanistan were admitted just 4 or 5 months ago, so we're not seeing too many with completed asylum yet. What you're going to see more often are people in the process with that card or the resident card. I did just put like images of the card just in a quick Word doc. I don't know if I can, let me see if I can. Oh, it still hosts as disabled participant screen sharing, but I don't know if you really need to see the image, but it's essentially a card like the same, like it's going to look the same size as your driver's license.
You can show now. Sorry, Megan.
Okay.
I'd like to.
It's not that exciting, but let's see if I can pull it up. Okay.
The one thing I will say is that we'll be preparing mock I-9s with all folks before they arrive to apply to a job with you. And so you'll never be referred someone to work who doesn't have who doesn't have work authorization, whatever form it will be. And folks will have practiced filling out the I-9 before the interview, hiring, onboarding process also. So if this is a little scaring a few folks, this won't be your responsibility alone to complete.
Yep, and here, and it sounds like a lot, but again, I just want to remind everybody, it's really not on you to have to learn the intricacies of the law. Are they applying for asylum? Do they have asylum? Were they admitted as green card holders already? Were they paroled in? So you're going to find people in all stages of the process. If they're paroled in, it's temporary. They only get a certain amount of time here. If they're applying for asylum, they get work authorization while they're waiting. If they receive asylum, they're on a permanent track, and many have already entered the country on a permanent track because they were eligible for a special category for having helped the U.S. military. So here's what they look like. We have an employment authorization card up here on the left and a green card on the right. These are the cards you're going to see in almost every case. So if they're trying to give you any other documents, you might want to feel free to send it to us. If you could send it to Alex, but even Alex, if you guys have any questions and you're seeing something that doesn't look right, feel free to send it. Down below, I'm showing what a lot of the people coming in are receiving. This is, it's called an I-94 card, and at the top, there's a stamp that says paroled. That's great that they have that. That means they were allowed lawfully into the country, but it does not give them work authorization automatically. They have to apply for this card up above, the employment authorization card. So just because they're here, it doesn't mean that they're not allowed to be here. It just means they have to take one more step before they're eligible to work. The one exception is there is a stamp on the second image down below. It's very hard to see, but it says I-551 evidencing permanent residency. Some people, when they come into the country, they haven't gotten their card in the mail yet, and they'll get a stamp that says I-551, you're a green card holder, you just aren't holding a green card yet, but you have all the rights and benefits. But again, that's not usually what you're going to see. And any unusual documentation that you're not sure about, feel free to get in touch with us, with Alex, with David. As mentioned, the penalties can be very high for not getting this right in either direction. You know, you don't want to treat anyone differently. You don't want to overly scrutinize anyone's documents, but you also don't want to have any compliance issues where you're hiring somebody without authorization. So, but again, you know, usually you're going to see two simple cards, and both cards are list A documents because they do have the photo and they also are evidence of authorization to work. Again, the social security number is not required, but you do need it pretty quickly. So, you know, you can wait a little bit for it to come in, but if the issue is not the social, the issue is the employment card, because often someone will say, oh, I haven't got my card. They're talking about their social security card, but maybe what they mean is they haven't gotten their actual card from the immigration service yet. That's much more common because that takes months. So there's going to be many people in your community that are coming in who would love to work for you, but unfortunately it may take several months before all of those individuals actually have authorization to work. And I will mention, not to complicate things further, but what's happening to a lot of the people coming from Afghanistan right now is the people who came in with green cards are great. That's the special immigrant visa program, wonderful. But a lot of them were brought in and were paroled in. So they're allowed to be here, but sometimes they have a parole stamp that only lasts for 1 year. So they can apply for a work card that takes some time to get, but they have to very quickly move on to something else. So what's happened, the first wave in the summer was trying to help people get in. And now everybody, like nonprofits everywhere, are trying to help all of these people apply for political asylum as fast as possible. But there are hundreds of people. And I know I'm part of this effort too. And I know there are hundreds of people with everybody working as fast as they can, and we can't get these applications in yet. So people are trying to file them. They're going to file them. Once they file them, they can request another category of work card. But there may actually be a lot of people who have a little gap between their parole work card and their new work card that's based on their asylum application. So you will see some people who have no authorization yet, or who have authorization, but that authorization is temporary, and they'll probably get another card soon, but there may be an employment gap. So it's okay to not hire somebody if you know they can't be permanent. But just so you're aware of sort of the scenario and the patterns that you might see. And I don't know, feel free to jump in. Cassandra, if you think you want to add anything, or David. That's pretty much all I've got.
I do just want to add the green card, just to clarify, any expiration date on the green card is not something to re-verify, even the 2-year conditional, which I double checked, which it sounds confusing, but if they have a green card, you don't need to renew it re-verify it, excuse me, in the same way that you wouldn't re-verify a citizen because their passport had an expiration date, because you know they're still a citizen. So they receive the same presumption that they're going to renew their card, and that document may expire, but they can renew it. If you get a stamp, like Megan was showing on the screen, that's a temporary green card, those do need to be re-verified, and it will be very clear because it says temporary on it, and it will have a shorter time that it's not expired. And I'm sure this sounds like a lot of information, but if you have protocols in place for I-9s and figure out the initial documentation, it's really not much more to take on to hire foreign nationals. And I think it would be great for your town and for them, obviously.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think one thing that I learned pretty early on is that, especially for folks who are seeking asylum, the last thing that they want is a legal infraction for doing something they shouldn't be doing. So these folks who want to remain in the United States long term, they are committed to ensuring that their paperwork is in order. And so I think that it's not something, it would not reflect well on their asylum claim if they are not following the rules. And so case managers and others who work with them short and long term are here to support them understanding their dates and their work authorization deadlines and the paperwork that they need to complete in order to stay here and be employed legally. The other thing I will say from the employer standpoint is that the hardest thing for you as employers may be related to the Social Security number, because it's not so much as, so you cannot discriminate as to whether or not they have a Social Security number, but getting them into your payroll system may be more difficult. And so I would encourage HR folks to learn what that looks like. You can put in zeros for people's Social Security number over a short period of time, and then go back and make sure that their taxes are paid. Or what is more likely the case is folks will be assigned a temporary Social Security number through Medicaid or Medicare, because those are federal relationships that they're establishing much more quickly than their formal asylum or through the Social Security Administration. So they may have a temporary Social Security number that is soon to be replaced by a permanent one. And so that is something your HR folks might just need to be aware of, is that you can get this person into payroll when they're hired, but you may need to look back to the hire date and then look at what changed in terms of documentation whenever that comes and make that adjustment. And so that's just something else that we've seen. Great. Any other questions? Questions for our legal experts here. Again, you won't be referred by me or other workforce partners, anyone who isn't eligible to work. The timeline at which they need to renew their documentation is something we'll be aware of, but our goal is to keep these folks in our community, to have them be supported, and for them to find a long-term home here. And so I think that we should all be partnered in those goals, and we'll see what the long-term work ability for everyone will be. But when in doubt, reach out to either myself or their case managers, and you'll hear a little bit about that. Any other questions?
Alex,
yep, go ahead.
I was just wondering if it would be possible for you to send my contact info and Megan's and Cassandra's out to the participants.
Yep, absolutely. I'll send a follow-up email. This recording will be put up, we'll have it on our YouTube channel, and we'll share that. It'll be on our website, and we'll also include the presentation if you'd be willing to share that with us, David. And then Megan and Cassandra, if you want to put your emails in the chat, I'll also make sure they make it onto the little blog post video that we'll have up. Thanks. Other legal questions? Great. So one thing that David mentioned was making sure that as a place of employment, your policies are aligned with your values, and that you're working to create that inclusive workplace, to the best of your ability. And as a part of the Welcoming Communities Project, and in support with from Vermont Community Foundation, we are offering a no-charge diversity, equity, and inclusion training this February. I'm going to put a link to register for that in the chat, and that will focus on hiring and recruitment practices, language to use in your employee handbooks and policies, and really looking at it from not so much from the values-driven approach. I think we all share those values of being inclusive. This is very much a tools and specific actions and policies to implement to live your values as an organization. The trainers for this are among the keynotes for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce annual meeting, which I believe is tomorrow. And so we're just really excited to get some, they work in Canada and in the US, some really great trainers with expertise in mature HR systems, let's say. So they really have some great tools and skill sets that they can share with folks. It's a 2-day workshop, 4 hours total. But again, it'll be offered twice. So it'll be offered in February and also in early summer. So again, if you were one of the folks who said, ooh, I don't know if my hiring processes are up to date, or I might need a little bit more support in writing, changing an employee handbook, this is a great training for you to attend and to send, whether it's your HR folks or your operations or your CEO, or if it's all the same person, that person is totally welcome. We're just asking for, between 2 and at 3 at most per organization, if possible. So thanks for that. Now I'd like to share really what I think a lot of you are most excited about, and that's how you can begin engaging with this population as workers. And so what I wanted to share first was an overview of what they'll be doing with us. Can you folks see this? All right. Yep. Can folks see my screen? Yeah. So the BVCC and our partners, we've been doing career awareness, preparedness programs, for years now. And so what we've done is we've adapted these presentations that we've done with high school and adult job seekers, and are going to be delivering it on SIT campus, where these folks will be taking courses for the next few months. So just to explain what's how these folks are coming into our community, all new arrivals will be at World Learning SIT campus for around 2 weeks. The folks with families and slightly larger groups will be moving into permanent housing and homestays as quickly as possible, and that's already happening. There are a number of single folks. They are more likely than not have arrived as individuals and have family back home. So when we say single folks, we're not saying they don't have families necessarily, but they may be the only people who were able to leave the country or to come to the United States. So as folks, while some folks will be living at World Learning campus the whole time, every day there's going to be ELL and cultural orientation courses in the mornings. Every Monday, we'll be delivering this programming to them. And so this is what they will be receiving. They'll get a basic understanding of the jobs and industries that are hiring in our area. And that is something that I encourage you all, as we speak. I'll put my email in the chat. If you have specific jobs that you'd like filled, or that you need filled, or ones that you think would be well suited for this population in general, email those to me as soon as you can, because this first session starts this afternoon. So I think the majority of you folks are already listed in my presentations, but if you have specific jobs that we can begin sharing, that would be great. So we'll do some basic assessment and awareness activities. What are their skill sets in the past? What careers or jobs did they hold in their home country? And start looking at transferable skill sets. We know there are quite a number of veterans, and those folks may be, some of them will have mechanical aptitude, some of them will be in transportation logistics, and some of them will be people. And that's kind of what we'll be helping them sort out as we go through the kinds of opportunities available. And so that's how we'll be organizing folks and jobs and connecting them to them. The second training is going to be how I mentioned the I-9 overview. So how to find and apply to jobs. Some of these folks will have great English and some of them won't. Some of them will have good resumes with documentation of their past education, and some of them definitely will not. And so I think that is another area in which discrimination can occur. And just to be aware of that is that, you know, asking for proof of education that you normally wouldn't require an American applicant is something to be aware of. We also know that background checks don't work the same way on these folks as they would an American employee also. It's much harder to verify someone's diploma for an institution that no longer exists, which may be the case in a country that's been, you know, ravaged by war for decades now. And, you know, their high school may not exist. So a diploma from that is an unrealistic expectation. But so they'll be trained to see, you know, what the I-9 looks like, to make sure documentation's in place to help them begin going from, oh, I think I could work in healthcare, to this opportunity at a local employer is one I'd like to pursue and I understand what it is. That's really the second session. Again, today and a week from today are going to be when you sharing your opportunities with me will be most valuable. We'll do practicing interviews and resume writing along with American workplace culture, and just making sure folks understand, you know, showing up on time, being communicative, and how to, you know, present the skill sets that they have in a way that really translates to our labor market. The last one is going to be meeting with partners, training providers, and other support organizations, whether they need support from Department of Labor or Voc Rehab. Maybe they want to upskill and they'll go to CCV or the Career Center. There are opportunities for that also that we'll share with them if they feel that they need more education or want more education before they enter the workforce. Another thing that we're working on is, as was mentioned, there may be a lag from when they arrive to when they're eligible to work. And so we're hoping to engage those folks in trainings before they may be eligible to work, so that by the time they get their work authorization card, they actually may be better prepared to enter the labor market than if they had just entered at that time. Any questions about that component, you know, that anyone would like to chat about? Questions? Okay. So the next little piece, you know, I do want to share about, and I'll put some of this in the chat, is we did have some best practices in employing these folks. And Dan, thank you for your points. You just chatted me about language barriers. So communication, regardless of where someone's national origin is always the biggest problem in the workplace. And I think that what I posted in the chat is some best practices in general, but one thing you'll see, and it's a YouTube video, so take your time to watch it. I will also attach the presentation as well. But what I think is important is so we're really promoting a cohort model of employing folks. And because we know that how folks learn, whether it's you know, with a new language or just a new skill set, we know that folks learn better together as a group. And so our goal is to identify those who can serve as interpreters and translators on the job, and really encourage you as employers to engage with folks as a learning cohort together. So even if you are spreading out new hires across 3 shifts, we would ask, and I will help arrange that they receive a tour together and that they can interview together, and that perhaps even onboarding and initial training can be done together. Because not only will the person with the strongest English be able to help translate for those who have less good English, they will all learn more quickly together as a cohort when they can confirm that, did I understand that correctly? And they can turn not just to a supervisor or a trainer, but also to a colleague, or someone who they've been with and been through these trainings at World Learning with, to reaffirm that they're understanding what's being communicated. We are, still waiting to see the language level of the folks coming in. There already is a interpreter translator. So one of the new arrivals is translating and interpreting for the presentations I'll be giving. It would not be a bad idea. And this is something that I can help those interested in for employers to coming together and perhaps hiring an interpreter or translator that they'd be willing to share. And so, part of my role is to help find resources where they exist and bring them to our region, but also to be creative about how these resources can be found elsewhere. And so, for instance, in Chittenden County, they have years of operating as a refugee resettlement organization where they have raised enough money and have a model where they can subsidize employer translation using other services they have. So we don't have that yet, but we can. And so as ECDC, which is the resettlement organization, begins hiring translators, there may be the opportunity for you as an employer to contract directly with ECDC and hire a trainer for a couple hours a day. We encourage folks to do to translate their workplace documents, copy and paste into Google Translate paragraph by paragraph. The last slide of my presentation is that don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Because even with perfectly expertly translated documents, we know that miscommunications happen in the workplace all the time, and that's okay. And it's really about our shared intention to support these folks and to make it a good fit. And so if it's a silly translation, someone will let you know, and you change it, and that's fine. That won't be, a mistranslation in an employment document won't be cause for a lawsuit. Hopefully it'll be a cause to everyone can chuckle about it, and it'll be an edit to a document. And I think even that exchange signals a welcomeness and supportiveness for this new population. So, yes, thank you so much. So, what you can expect, as you send me job postings, I'll begin sharing them with folks as soon as this afternoon. When I have between, 3 to 5 folks who may be interested in 1 or 2 jobs, could be fewer, depending on what the position is, but then I'll begin reaching out to you all as employers and seeing what you need and how you would like to structure getting to know these folks. I will say right now, because of COVID, it's getting access to World Learning is, I wouldn't say difficult, but would take some time. So if you are interested in presenting to an entire group, that's something you can let me know about as well. And we can see if we can arrange for something at World Learning. But again, we hope that we can do much of that early work and that sorting of folks based on what their interests and aptitudes are, and really start getting to a point where they can meet you in much more of an informational and to get to work quickly. I mean, to be frank, these folks are required to accept the first job that they're offered. They're required to, and I'm, in parentheses, my job is to make sure that the first job they're offered is one that they like, and that is a good one in terms of wages and benefits. But I think that, as I mentioned, these folks, even the single ones, quote unquote, have family at home that are in a much more dire situation than they are. And so their incentive to work is going to be strong. And so our role is to kind of, anticipate any of the barriers early and to set it up in a way that, you know, the most amount of folks can succeed. And I think that it's okay, you know, in the same way that our own employees that we have now, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think that's okay. You know, I encourage folks to not to have any individual experience with a new arrival, you know, flavor their interpretation of how any other employee may be able to, you know, work there. And I think that is a big thing around, you know, non-discrimination that's really important, is that these folks, you know, they are all different in the same way that our own workplace is. And so you know, they're just to keep that in mind. And they have support. So the other thing that, you know, as a part of their, you know, support, they have both a caseworker who's an ECDC. This is, again, the Refugee Resettlement Group, one of their employees, helping them in you know, in every facet. There's also co-sponsorship groups, which are community groups who will also have an employment point person. And so what you may see for the I-9 or during an interview is there may be a volunteer coming along with them, helping them with the I-9. And there's a document that accompanies the I-9 that says, you know, someone helped me fill that out. And that's something that you might see as well. So they'll be well supported. Again, if there's a no call, no show, chances are it's a miscommunication or something, you know, much more serious than someone not willing to show up to work that day. And that would be a great time to call their case manager. And that's something that, you know, again, these folks are very well supported. They'll be together every day. They'll be in touch with their support systems at World Learning and elsewhere regularly. So there is a lot of support to help these folks succeed. There was a question about temporary positions. Yeah, send us whatever you need filled that you think. Again, we don't know the skill sets of these individuals, but you know, just any job openings that you would like to be filled for these folks to be aware of. And I think temporary is fine. You know, these, you know, to be frank, while our goal is to have all of these people stay, some of them will leave, and that's okay also. And I think it's not something that you should be too concerned about. But if these folks have family in another part of the country and they're just trying to earn enough money to be able to relocate to their family there, we should be supporting them in doing that as well, because that's them, you know, what they need is to reunite with their family. And the process in which they arrived to Vermont was a haphazard one. And so just to be aware that that's not a, you know, it doesn't speak to you as an employer, nor does it speak to them or refugees in general as a population to employ. You know, these folks have different aspirations and needs as anyone would. Questions, comments?
Alex.
Yeah.
Should we all assume that they've all been vaccinated?
Yes. Yep. So that is something, you know, World Learning is doing very well. So everyone is vaccinated and boosted, I believe, and they are very strict with who has access to the campus. And so as a trainer, even though I've been working with you know, ECDC and World Learning for months and months and months, they even put me through the rigmarole of all of my status, you know, vaccination status. Do you attest to wearing a mask on campus? And folks are being tested regularly on campus. So I think, you know, this as a population, and it does go back in some ways to the work authorization, is no one wants to have a stable environment than these folks. You know, no one wants that more than these folks themselves. And so in terms of complying with, you know, to the best of their ability of what, you know, policies and regulations and what's expected of them as community members, they will be far more compliant than your average US citizen. You know, we know that immigrants have lower crime rates. We know they have better business startup rates. You know, I think that it's 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 an exciting population. I think that Brattleboro is not used to working with, but I think we'll all benefit from it. And among that, because they need to be very thoughtful about how they're complying and just adjusting and assimilating and integrating with our community. Other questions? Great. Again, send me any job postings, whether today or for next week that you'd like shared with this community. Again, I'll be here to set up tours, interviews, whether it's group, virtual, in person. You let me know what works for you all as employers, and we'll keep bringing up resources. I'm sure I'll learn a million things after this training this afternoon and incorporate it in the next week's training, and feedback from you all as we do get into hiring and onboarding. We'll start learning where there are gaps in resources and interpretation and training. And if we have 4 employers that need 2 hours of translation a week, that sounds like an excellent opportunity to share the cost of an interpreter or translator to help make sure that everything is going well on site. Great question, Sarah. Thank you. These folks, a priority is to get them, and this was around transportation. So they do have access to the mover. We have an excellent partner in the mover who is already set up to transport people upwards to Bellows Falls and also to the Deerfield Valley area, Southern Vermont, Deerfield Valley. It may be trickier. Again, they're new folks learning a public transportation system. And so I think that's another place where cohorts will be valuable. If the bus is late, it'll be 5 people who are late, and it won't be their fault that they didn't get there on time. Similarly, as folks get driver's licenses, which they are eligible for, that is also where having folks on the same shift will be really helpful, because the moment one of them is able to get a full driver's license, the likelihood that they'll be able to carpool and support transportation outside of the bus and public transportation hours will be also an opportunity. Lastly, there is a commuter van program that is it's available through the state of Vermont. It helps subsidize the cost of commuter vans. And so again, if there's a group of employers who would like to ensure that all their employees get to work on time every day, the best way to do that is to find a means to come together and maybe, again, let me know, and we can engage in that program. And that is a demand response program. So it can be, it's very flexible and can be really just to get folks from where they are to their place of work, wherever that may be. And so that's another opportunity. I'll be here to help employers explore and promote. Yes, Randy, thank you so much. He just put the link to that in the chat. Again, we're not Chittenden County, and so all of our solutions will be collaborative in nature. And my role is to ensure that everyone's collaborating who wants to, and that that we're not duplicating or wasting any resources in fitting and filling all of your employment needs. I think yes, I'm providing the training to folks directly, but first and foremost, my role is to support employers in preparing and engaging with this population. And so any of those questions can be sent to me, and we can start working on those solutions. Questions, comments? Great. Well, again, thanks to everyone for joining. I will be taking this video. I'll put it on our website. It'll be up this afternoon, probably. You'll have a list to all of the contacts and the presentation as well, and links to other things that have been shared. Any last questions, comments, or concerns?
Thanks very much, Alex.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for attending, and I'm sure I hope to be touring your facility soon with some new and excitable employees. So thanks, everyone.